Another edition of the Agents of Fandom podcast, one that my co-host and I have been waiting for weeks. We told you the episode was crazy. We could say literally nothing else. It's been so hard to speculate. It's been so hard to theorize, and now we finally can dive in to Loki episode 4. We know nothing going forward. Joined, as always, by my co-host Adam Blevins. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Yeah, like you said, it's just been so difficult these last few weeks talking about what's going to happen to Victor Timely, what's going to happen to the temporal loom. Oh wow, I don't know. It's been so crazy, and I've seen so many people on Twitter and all over social stuff being like, "Wow, I cannot believe we have to wait an entire week for this next episode." And I'm like, some of us have had to wait like a month and a half, and it's been absolutely miserable. So I'm so glad to finally just be able to sit down with you guys and air everything out. I can't wait.
If you're joining us live on Twitch, thank you so much for doing so. I just am loading mine up right now, and I realized my subscription didn't renew, and so I'm sitting here getting an ad. And what is it? An ad for Spider-Man 2 on PS5. So I also wanted to quickly thank everyone who tuned into those live streams, as well as we're going to have a full breakdown and review, deep dive of the game. Myself, Adam, Damon, and Ryan, all from the Agents of Fandom team, dropping on the Agents of Fandom podcast feed, so make sure you are subscribed there as well. We have a very special guest today, ready to talk Loki with us. You may know him on socials as Reed Reeds, from host of A Bite of a Pod. How you doing, Reed?
Hey, good. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive into episode 4 with spoilers, what have you thought of the series so far, and what have you thought of episode 4 specifically?
Ooh, are you asking me? Am I in the hot seat?
Okay. Yeah, you're in the hot seat.
I like it. I think that first season, fantastic. This season, if they stick it, also fantastic. I have some thoughts of like where it should go for me personally to make it like super good, but I've really enjoyed it. It just has that special something that I think only Loki so far has with the MCU shows. But yeah, I mean, I'm enjoying it. I think all of us are in agreement there as you guys like nod your heads like, yep, fantastic.
It's gonna be interesting to see if they can stick the landing, because it is the most, I think, ambitious thing that we have seen in a Marvel series so far. And so if they go back to like oh, just kidding, it wasn't that big of a deal, here's a big battle for the final episode, it's going to be very disappointing. But if this truly breaks multiple things in the multiverse open and we get some crazy stuff going forward, which we'll touch on more at the end, of course, I think this has potential to be one of the best seasons of Marvel television, if not the best season of Marvel television ever. One of the things that I love, and we talked about this, Adam, on the Spider-Man pod, which I won't go into details or spoilers for that one, because that show is full spoilers for Spider-Man. This one is not. We're still going to give everyone a time to finish it. But one of the things I loved about that Spider-Man story is there were so many times that I just got taken off guard. I didn't know it was coming, and I got blown completely off guard. And that's what this Loki season is too. I have no idea what's coming. I couldn't have less of a clue. And to me, that is just so exciting. I love that in these series, not knowing what is coming next. Adam, I want to talk about the intro, because this episode hit hard right off the bat. Miss Minutes has been teasing with Renslayer that there's been more to her story she didn't know. We get to see some footage of He Who Remains and Renslayer saying that they're going to lead together side by side, and then he commands Miss Minutes to erase not only her memory, but everybody in the TVA's memory. What context do you think that adds to Renslayer's character? And then do you think this is, a comic accurate, they were a couple, just like they were in comics, and then that was a real thing that happened, that was just footage? Or do you think Miss Minutes might be doctoring it a little bit to do some scheming?
Well, as somebody that's not familiar with the comics and watching this, I would be surprised if the two of them were actually in an intimate relationship, because that seems like a particularly icky thing to tackle, given that we now know he was erasing her memory. And then if it's later revealed that they were also in a relationship and he was erasing her memory, means he could be doing some particularly harrowing things and, not having to pay the consequences for it. But it doesn't really add any extra context for us because we know Kang's a bad dude and we know he's been erasing people's memories. That's the only way he's got all these people there working for him. But and Renslayer, has been much more of an antagonist this season so far anyway, kind of presented against Loki and Sylvie and them, but it's still pretty like heartbreaking to kind of watch her come to that realization that like she was doing all this work and he was just kind of taking all the credit. But I don't know. I mean, like I said, it doesn't really add the context because we know in Kang, He Who Remains, Victor Timely, just to properly identify all of them, they're all like bad people. Like I know Victor Timely is kind of, he's not gone down that path yet, so we're willing to give him a little more leniency. But like, it's not really all that surprising to see that he was doing this. But I don't know. I'd be surprised if it was really kind of any intimate thing. But it really just further proves the point that like He Who Remains was a really, really bad dude. Even though he made it out to be in the Loki season 1 finale, like, oh, I'm just like protecting the timeline. I'm doing everything that I've got to do. Like, you guys actually need me. Like, no, like you're actually like a pretty terrible fucking person. So, and this kind of revelation that we get here just further proves that.
Reed, what was your take on this? Because last episode, episode 3, we see both Miss Minutes and Renslayer kind of just, fawning over Victor Timely of like, I want to be at your side. I want to be partners. I love you. And now we get to see it as he kind of discarded both of them at the end of episode 3, what may have gone down between Renslayer and Kang. What did you think of the intro scene, and do you buy it that was one for one, or do you think this is some Miss Minutes mischief?
I don't trust her for a damn second. I do miss horny Miss Minutes. I don't necessarily like this like sociopath Miss Minutes, but I don't trust her for a single second. But there might be some truth in what she's showing, but she might have doctored it a little bit. I mean, it's not actual footage, right? It's she constructed it. So who's to say that actually happened? I don't know. I don't trust anything in this show until it's over. So yeah, I really don't trust her at all. I do think there is some truth in it, though, that she did play a big part in the multiversal war. But him erasing memories probably is the fact, right? Because we've already seen that happen. But I don't know if this conversation actually happened.
That was the thing. At first, I definitely thought that it was just like it was real on first watch, and then after going back and watching it again, it did seem like there was a little bit of Miss Minutes manipulation going on there. But it's kind of fully revealed what was a lot speculated, that he just erases everyone's memories. He gets rid of them. He just keeps rebooting it over and over and over again. How do you I put this in later in the rundown as well of like, do you think there's some significance to the key lime pie, or is it just key lime pie because they reference it so often? And I've seen people theorize on Twitter that like maybe this is how it's partially a tool to utilize the memory erasing here. Adam, I'll throw it to you first. We've speculated this. We kind of knew that it was coming, but how does he do it? How do you think Miss Minutes is just kind of like rewriting all the memories of these people?
Well, I mean, the key lime pie thing is a good theory, but we also have to consider that this particular version of Kang that's at the end of time, that's seen everything there is to see, that knows everything that's ever happened and everything that's going to happen, like erasing somebody's memory seems, like a pretty small tool in that tool belt. I mean, we see that happening like all the way back to the Winter Soldier and things, like people getting their memories erased. So it's like somebody with the arsenal of technology that Kang has. I don't know. I mean, it feels like we've really only seen to like a very small amount of what all he has to offer, and like sure they haven't showed, that he has some room that they walk into. I kind of don't think it's the key lime pie. Like I think that's a good theory, but I'd be surprised if it's like he's putting memory loss nanobots or whatever in the key lime, like whatever the however that would work. I'd kind of be surprised if that was the outlet there. Whether he's like sending people into a room for some kind of evaluation and then they or whatever is going on there, I don't know. But I mean, it doesn't really, it's not, that's another thing. It's not really surprising because we know like how much information and how much technology he has at his disposal. So like, if it was something like the key lime pie, I mean, that would be kind of cool, but it would also kind of be like, really? Like you've traveled thousands or maybe even millions of years and accumulated all this stuff and you're using key lime pie? Like, I mean, I guess I'd get it and it would make sense, but I don't know. It seems like something a little more sinister at play there that maybe they kind of haven't revealed to us yet.
Reed, what do you think?
You know, the key lime pie is interesting, right? It's like, why don't we see anybody else in there except for, I think we've seen 3 of our characters in there so far. So if it really is something that like erases the memories, I'm curious if it's almost like it appears when it needs to happen. So like Sylvie got mad at Mobius for talking about wanting pie, and then all of a sudden she found herself in the room with the pie, and she clearly was like, I didn't even want to come here. How did I get here? So I'm curious if there is something that has to do with it. But I mean, as far as his technology, he can stop these gods from using their powers in the TVA. I think like maybe memory wiping is a little easier, but how that's exactly done, I feel like is going to be an interesting thing to find out.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't know if that's going to be further explored, but it is something that they're kind of leaving hanging there that I do find quite interesting. But Victor Timely he enters the TVA, he sees his face everywhere, really a crazy experience, and then he meets his idol. OB, Ouroboros, the writer of the TVA handbook, the two fanboy over each other, and then Adam, Retribution, because you got torched on Twitter for the usage of the word bromance between Loki and Mobius, but Sylvie throws it out between Victor Timely and OB there, and that truly was a great bromance. It was hilarious seeing the two of them geek out with each other.
Oh yeah, Reed, to add a little bit of context that you may not be familiar with, when I tweeted about Loki when the social embargo went up, I referred to Loki and Mobius in my tweet as a bromance simply to save characters. Like I think I called them out by names, but then I cut it down. And I had, I don't know, somewhat of 300 to 400 quote tweets of people saying some really heinous things about like referring to the two of them as a bromance and not like an actual romance. People were
Mm.
very, very upset about that. So it was a full circle moment for me to hear Sylvie actually say it. You know, I walked so Sophia DiMartino could run. That's how I'm going to choose to look at that right here. But it was really, really cool to see Timely and OB kind of interact in a similar way that we see Casey interact. Except obviously that wasn't reciprocated from OB with Casey earlier, like it was with OB. But it was really kind of confusing. And then like OB uses a great reference to talk about like a snake biting his own tail, because it's like, wait a minute, like he gave, like, if I feel like I'm constantly, when I start thinking about it, I'm in this cycle of like, who came first, the chicken or the egg? Because I'm like, okay, OB wrote the book and gave it to Timely, but Timely used the stuff in the book to help OB write the book. And then I'm like, well, so, and then you could just do that like over and over again. It's like actually really confusing. Like I'm on the record saying this season, excuse me, that the time travel stuff just really kind of gets in my head. I'm not great at analyzing and picking apart like, well, they went back in time and did this, so this had to have like. I'm just along for the ride. I'm just I'm just strapped in, and I'm just going to take it where like I'm going to let them take me wherever they want to. But this really really cool to see, even if like so many other things this season I didn't necessarily completely understand it, but it was still really cool.
Reed, how about you? Do you have a firmer grasp on what came first, the chicken or the egg? And what did you think about the kind of all the TVA guidebook pieces and breadcrumbs that have been left throughout this series finally came to fruition with the two of them meeting for the first time?
You know, on my podcast, I have this theory floating around that Ouroboros has been like a theme of this entire season, right? And, you know, no hate against OB, but for him to literally be like, it's Ouroboros, like biting your own tail. It's like, yeah, we got it. We got it, OB. Like that was very like blatant in the face in case people forgot. But I have a feeling since, you know, he said Victor Timely is the one that helped me write this book and vice versa. Not to skip ahead, but when something happens at the end of this, it's kind of a lot like what happened in Ant-Man, where then when it's unraveled, goes all in space and time and different timelines in all of them. So it would make sense that Victor is somewhere in something, or there's just a big loop, right? Does the TVA always get reset at a certain time? Is this something that always happens? Did this change that? So I mean, that's kind of my thought. The Ouroboros is really kind of in this season, so I'm curious if this has happened before or a version of it.
Exactly. That kind of comes down to another question we're going to dive into more at the end of this is everything that happened in this episode, all of this chaos, was that chaos or was that part of a Kang, whether it be He Who Remains, the Conqueror, or anybody else's, was that being orchestrated by them? Was this all part of the plan? It's very kind of interesting to dive into, and I can't wait to learn more as the episodes come through. But as they're interacting, like I found that the dynamic between the entire group awesome with just somebody mentions like well somebody killed He Who Remains and Sylvie's like yep I did, and she kind of gives a little smile, and then the dynamic with between Mobius and Loki and Sylvie, OB and Victor Timely, Casey's hanging out there, that little group dynamic I could watch like just like a little sitcom of them hanging out, and that would be kind of like enough of a show for me. But one thing I want to touch on is like they were looking for ways to fix the loom, and Victor kind of comes in and goes like, "Oh, I have some ideas." His prototype loom, it's spherical. Do we think that is the kind of initial beginning of not just the big temporal loom that we see in the TVA, but do we think that is the prototype of Kang the Conqueror's time chair that we see broken in Quantumania that he needs to fix with Wasp, with Janet Van Dyne, to get himself out of there? It pops back and forth very similarly the way that that time chair does. Do we think that big prototype he is so protective of is the beginning of his comics, animation, and what we saw in Quantumania, Kang's little getup? Adam, what do you think?
In short, no, I don't. I actually like it. Does look like it. It looks exactly like it until he opens it up, and then it's kind of like, okay, well, maybe he just likes kind of building things with circles because the inside of it is like clearly. I mean, and then they're like taking it apart and expanding upon it and doing all kinds of stuff. So it's like this could have, in my opinion, some technology that maybe ties into the time chair and some stuff. I'm sure it's constantly for him. It's constantly evolving and all this stuff, but I don't know. Like I would personally be surprised if this little device used to. It seems like well, I guess they didn't really. I can't say unsuccessfully fix the temporal loom because he didn't really make it out there. But I would be surprised if this little device was like the one of the initial forms of any kind of like of his time chair. I mean, maybe there's some overlapping technology there, but and I hate to rain on the parade. You know, I love a good theory. It's a good theory, but I would just be surprised if that was the case.
I'm honestly I'm gonna skip ahead to some portions of the rundown here and get us a little halfway through the episode theory time, because usually we save theories for the end, but there are a lot of things that a few have come up in chat and a few that I just think fit in well with this conversation that we've been waiting to theorize for 4 weeks. I want to do it now. But Reed, what do you think about the potential for the prototype loom to be the beginnings of the time chair?
I think it's the beginning of something. I don't know if it's the chair. Maybe he just likes spheres in some way, and that just like he's like, I made this thing one time. Let me make a chair. But it does remind me, what was the spherical thing that was almost like the MacGuffin in Ant-Man Quantumania? Wasn't there like a sphere of some sort that he needed? I don't know if that's like something to go along with that, but I do feel like something in Kang's comic history also had to do with the sphere. So I'm curious of what, maybe it's that. I don't think it's necessarily the chair. Maybe the technology is similar in some way, but keep going back to Ant-Man and the Wasp. There's a lot of parallels in this one, you know?
As much
Finally.
as tough as it is to say, like, and look, I enjoyed Quantumania, I think, more than most people. I recognized it had flaws, but I don't think it was as bad as people made it out to be. Having said that, I don't feel great about the fact that I want to go rewatch it more now after this. We can see if there's any Easter eggs that we can pick up on throughout it. But I agree with Chad. I do think the orb has some big significance. Miss Minutes was, as Carlos mentioned, just like absolutely shocked when she saw it in episode 3. The reason I think it could have some, maybe this is me reading into it too much, but looking at things like the one other thing he was obsessed with, if at the beginning of like, this is my invention, I want to show it to you, Renslayer, it's so cool. It was his literal fridge chair. It was his chair that you sit in that has a fridge and cools your butt down. And so, like, the two things he was most focused on were a chair and then this big time sphere. And so I do think that could potentially kind of be a little bit of foreshadowing, but it doesn't
Well,
bother me
that's
when
the
I'm wrong
chair,
on these
right?
things either.
That's the prototype to the chair, is the
Yeah,
refrigerator.
it is the refrigerator one. we saw it. We saw it all along, but Reed, I want to throw this one to you first. One part that I found very interesting is we've discussed the idea of order versus chaos as kind of like a thematic through point through this, and we really get to see Sylvie and Loki in the key lime pie room dive into that, of that concept of like, you can't just give free will to people and then do nothing else and then not come around, and Sylvie says like, you want us to play God, and he says we are gods. That is what we do. And the part that I found very interesting about that, and shout out to the Listen 3000 crew, another podcast on the Agents of Fandom podcast network, hosted by Zen and Caesar, they were theorizing on there that the next quote-unquote he who remains, the next head of the TVA, won't be a Kang, it'll be Loki. Loki, that's the path he is on here. What's your take on, one, that theory, and two, their conversation, this idea of order versus chaos, TVA bad, TVA good, it's necessary, it's unnecessary. Like, I found it so cool that they lay out all the themes right there, but not really give one upper hand over the other in the argument.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like having an argument with yourself, right? It's Loki gets to have this conversation with Sylvie, who is literally a version of himself, but having those two different, is this good, is this bad? I mean, the order versus chaos, if we look at the people that like want order in this series, it's Renslayer, right? And I don't think she's necessarily going about things the correct way. So I'm more leaning towards chaos, and that's just because that's what the universe is, right? The universe is nothing but chaos. It's random, it is what it is, and then sometimes humans exist and sometimes they don't. But that's kind of where I'm leading. I do like their conversation here because I think somebody like Sylvie would forget that where she comes from because she's hasn't been there in so long. She got taken when she was a kid, and she's had to do nothing but fight and hide and everything. Now she works at McDonald's, and he's like, by the way, you're still a god. Like, you could still work at McDonald's, but you're a god also. I like this conversation. I think it is needed for the series because there's a lot of big stuff happening that sometimes our characters don't necessarily talk about because they're running around doing something else and trying to put out this fire over here and not doing this over here. So these scenes are needed, right? I think it's a good thing that we had it.
And Adam, the new part of that conversation that I love so much is it's funny. You see those memes that it's like, name a performance of a male actor, name a great performance from a male actor where they're not yelling. And this was one of those cases where Loki was yelling for a lot of it, but damn, Tom Hiddleston was doing such a good job of portraying Loki's growth, of destruction is easy, hope is hard, trying to fix this, trying to do the right thing, that's hard. It's easy to go in there and kill someone, light the match, and start it all on fire. It's hard to build it back up afterwards. I thought that was such a great portrayal of Loki's growth.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was getting ready to say. The growth and the character development from him is really on display right there. And I wanted to call back to last week where it's funny. Like, I know I saw all 4 episodes, but until I rewatched this morning, considering it had been a month ago, I had largely forgot. I don't know if you remember, but last week I said that I like to, in my head, kind of think that when Loki, in whichever episode it is during season 1, when he goes through and kind of regains all of his memories from the entire, Infinity Saga timeline, and he's kind of caught up to date. Well, in this episode, he says he kind of gives a little bit of Thor callback and says like, my brother got banished to Earth, and he came back, and like I thought he was soft, but really like I see he was just like fighting to do what was right, and like sometimes like realizing that what's right is not like, and then that also kind of transitions into what Natasha tells Steve in Civil War, like the path of the least resistance isn't necessarily, or the most resistance isn't necessarily the right path. And it's like, and so I don't know, it's a little bit of an interesting contrast there. But like, I really think, like I said last week, that Loki's path is really heavily influenced by his brother, even though the two of them have kind of been split up for a while now. But like, it really was a great display. And Tom Hiddleston's always incredible, as you said. The performance is just as we've kind of come to expect. Like, I think I'd be more thrown off if he wasn't awesome in a scene, because it's just so accustomed to him being awesome. But that scene is a really, really good display of his growth, but it is really, really kind of sad. Also, just to think about all the ramifications of their actions, like before they knew kind of everything they're doing. I mean, he says they are gods and stuff, but I don't know. There's kind of a lot. There's a lot to unpack in that scene for sure.
What do you think about the potential for Loki to one day take over the TVA and be a new version of He Who Remains?
I actually can see that being a good possibility, because we've kind of like, that's a part of Loki's arc that he never really got to see out. Like throughout the Infinity Saga, he always wants to be a king, to be a leader. That's like his primary thing, and he never really gets to that point. Like every time he gets there, he just kind of self-sabotages himself, like so many of us do. You finally get the one thing you want, and then you sabotage yourself and you ruin it. Like Loki's just like all of us. But it would be like a perfect kind of full circle moment for him to finally get to be a leader and get to be a good leader, knowing everything that he knows like now. But it's hard for me to imagine a world where that happens and goes well. I can see something like that happening, but be it in Loki season 3 or Kang Dynasty or however they continue this story, it seems like tragedy is kind of in Loki's nature. So even though I can see that happening, it's hard for me to imagine it ending well.
Do we think that he's the best person though? Like, could Mobius do it, or even like Hunter B-15? You know what I mean? Like I think she's a great candidate to be, if the TVA actually has to exist, right? Like if this is something that's not going to go away after Kang Dynasty, like I feel like Hunter B-15 deserves, something.
That'd be a good test for Loki too. Or I was just to say quickly, that'd be a great test for Loki too, if they finally get to that point and like he has this, he finally has the chance for his throne, like it's right there in front of him, and somebody's like, hey, like maybe somebody else should do this given your history. And then that's like the ultimate test for him. Like, is he really ready to say, you know what, like Thor does eventually, and just say, you know what, I don't want the throne. Like, I don't need the throne. All I care about is doing what's right. Like, would Loki be able to really do that? Or would he inevitably be like, no, like this, like fall back into his old habits and be like, no, like I'm going to take it. I'm going to do this. So now you mentioned that, I'd love to get to see something like that.
Or even Casey. You know what I mean? Like, I think he knows the handbook front and back.
Yeah. I can see, so I want to talk about B-15 too, because not only was the acting performance just by Wunmi Mosaku in this episode just absolutely incredible, but in addition to that, she played a really important role. Talking about with the other hunters, saying like, you convinced me that the TVA can be a better place, and she's kind of the driving force there. It would be interesting to see, if not leading the TVA, if she does end up becoming like the head judge or like the top person of making decisions under whoever maybe the more mystical leader of things would be. But it would be interesting to see, bringing it back to Loki, in the Avengers, when him and Thor are talking and he says like, you think yourself above them, brother. And he goes, well, yes. Then the throne would suit you ill. I do think it would be interesting to come back of like, Loki no longer necessarily has that same like, I think I'm above all of these people. It's like, I'm a failure. I'm no longer seeking the throne, but it's falling to me because I can make a positive impact. I do think that would be a very interesting story. But B-15 was incredible throughout it, and I do hope she continues to have a important role going forward. And all of this seems to kind of be beginning to be going according to plan. And then Renslayer and Miss Minute shows up. And Renslayer squelches everybody. You don't see it, but you hear it. Brad, a.k.a. X5 or whatever his name is, just the absolute worst, the bratty chattiest of Brads, and just the absolute worst throughout this episode, but he plays a pretty important role. And Miss Minutes, like you said, Reed, she was horny last episode. This episode,
Woo!
just sadistic as all hell.
Boo.
And so shout out to Emma in chat because Emma has a great tweet. Like everybody was tweeting about things of Miss Minutes and that smile when all the murder was happening, and Emma goes, "This is me when I'm spraying the Lysol on a bug inside of my house." When is that you guys? What type of destruction and chaos are you giving that sadistic kind of look to? Adam, I'm throwing it to you first.
Wow, that's a question that I did not prepare for, but I'll say throwing it back to my Red Dead Redemption 2 streams, that was me just like at the whim of chat that was constantly requesting me to rob people, shoot people, lasso
Shout out
people
to
up.
Ash also in the chat right now.
Lasso and hog top people and throw them into a lake or something like that. That was how it felt watching it. Like, and I had to put on a show for them, be like, guys, this is horrible. We can't do this. But then I'm watching just like Miss Minutes, like, this is awesome.
There is I will say, I won't spoil for those who haven't made it through the game yet, but there's a certain part in Spider-Man that makes me feel exactly that same way as well. Reed, how about you? What chaotic event do you give the Miss Minute smile to?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I'm the type of person that like will capture spiders and put them outside because I can't kill them. Okay, well, I mean, if we're going with insects, because I'll go with M, right? Okay, so like ants, I have a lot of them in my backyard. I have these things where they'll take them and then take them back to the colony and then die. So that's something that I'm like, good, you're taking it back to your colony, and I just watch it happen. Because that's all I'll say on that. So I'm with M on that.
The reason I pointed out M specifically of just like spraying it with the Lysol, watching it die, is because I was like, there was one time, like this was like 2-3 weeks ago, where there was this beetle in my house on like a windowsill, and I couldn't like reach it because of the angle of the windowsill. Like I couldn't squash it because it was like hiding in the thing. And I took a lighter and I just and I killed it that way. And my first thought was exactly that, Reed. I was like, oh my God, why did I just do that? That was terrible. I shouldn't have done that. That was terrible. And then another one popped up and I did it again.
Well,
and at that moment, I was just like, what is wrong with me? Am I enjoying this right now? Like,
I mean, you did it more than once.
Yeah. At the first time, it felt like a mistake, and then all of a sudden, it was happening again, and I just didn't know why, but there it was. But it did. It led to just like the race against the clock aspect of this entire season really came to fruition after Miss Minutes and Renslayer had caused all of that madness. Dampeners taken off. That means magic inside the TVA. We get to see Loki and Miss Minutes, or Loki and Sylvie, sorry, going crazy, using their magic, and she enchants old Brad, and he goes and stabs Renslayer. Renslayer gets pruned. She's gone to the void. Adam, will this be the last we see of Renslayer? Are we going back to the void in season 2? What do you think was going on with it seemed like they were taken over, and then between the reboot and then as soon as the reboot happened, they were basically just done.
I would be very surprised at this point if we don't see Ravonna Renslayer again. I would assume that would have to go back to the void. And we know Eliath is gone, or is he? I don't know. Maybe we go back and maybe there's a different void, and I have no idea, because it also just seems. The thing I keep thinking about is like, well, now Victor Timely is obviously dead. I mean, they spaghettied his ass, which we're going to talk about later. But like, is this just he? I feel like Kang or He Who Remains or some variant of this character has to appear at the end of the show. So in the last 2 episodes, in some capacity. So it's like maybe wherever she ends up is in a different. Whatever that place. I'm already blanking on what's the place with Eliath that you just. What was it again?
The void.
The void, that's right. I don't know why that just completely escaped me for a second right there. I apologize. But like, it does seem sensible. Maybe there's multiple voids. I mean, there's only one sacred timeline, so it seems like that sounds silly to say, but it's like, I have no idea how it would be a little counterintuitive to kind of just go back and do the exact same thing that Loki and Sylvie did at the end of season 1 with Renslayer. But it's like, I still would be really surprised if we didn't see her again. So this is another one of those things, kind of like you talked about at the top. I have no idea what's going to happen with her or where they're going to go from here, but I feel like it's almost a certainty that we're going to see her again.
Reed, what about you? Where do you think we could see Miss Minutes pop up next? Will we be taking a trip to the Void? And what is your kind of? I want to hit that one first. Then I got another question for you.
We're definitely going to see Renslayer again, right? I mean, that was a dramatic thing that happened, but it's almost like Mobius getting pruned, and now Renslayer is the one that's getting pruned. It's it's a circle, right? It's just going right back to that circle. Somebody's getting in there, they have to get out. Miss Minutes is a tricky one, right? I'm curious if we will see her. We will by the end of the season, I think, but how she gets back is actually the bigger question, and how even Renslayer gets back from the void and what she sees there. I mean, are all those other Lokis still there, or are they not there? Did Eliath get them? Is there other Renslayers there instead of Lokis? I don't know how the void works, So I guess we'll see.
And the next part I kind of want to take a transition to because I found it just chilling. One of the best Miss Minutes parts of the whole season was as she's kind of glitching out of existence. She hits Victor timely with it. Victor, you will never be him, and just finalizes the thorn in the coffin of she was wildly in love with He Who Remains. The horniness was deep down in there all along, tied with the sadistic nature. Adam, will this be the last time we have seen Miss Minutes this season?
No, I don't think Renslayer or Miss Minutes. I think I would be very surprised if they were just done. But I want to shout out the editing in that scene because it's so cool. We get a couple of scenes when Victor Timely is looking at these statues of himself, but in that particular scene, she says that and then kind of fades out, and we see the statues of Kang / He Who Remains like kind of right behind him, and he kind of turns and steps and looks, and that's just like a really well directed, edited scene right there. That was just like really really cool. When I was watching it today, I was like, man, that's really well done. But I don't know. I would be, yeah, just like Miss Renslayer. I'd be really surprised. I mean, these two characters have been kind of staples in the show, and I mean, I guess I get every character has has run their course or has to run their course eventually. But this would be kind of anticlimactic for them if this was just how they end. And plus, we've seen people get pruned and come back, and I know Miss Minutes didn't get pruned; she got shut out of the system or however that works, and we have no idea if there will even be a system to come back to when we pick up in the next episode, or if the entire TVA is destroyed, or if there's multiple TVAs, or I mean, I have no idea. But like, surely, if the TVA if there's any form of the TVA, which I feel like there still has to be, I feel like we may pick up the next episode in like absolute chaos, but I still feel like Miss Minutes is in there somewhere. Like, I think they were able to kind of hold her at bay and like shut her off, but I don't think they completely like cleansed her from the system or anything. I think she's still in there, and maybe it'll take another Kang variant or Renslayer coming back or somebody turning on somebody to bring her back out. But I'm sure we'll see her again in the next 2 episodes.
Reed, do you think we will see her again? And my other question for you was, how have you kind of digged this whole race against the clock? The clock is ticking, bomb's going to go off style storytelling that they've been doing so far this season.
I think it's been showcased the best in this episode, right? Because it's very apparent and it's in the face, and you can actually see the TVA currently crumbling down. I feel like some of the past episodes, even though they have a goal that they need to do, or like it's this time period this week, we've been removed from the TVA in a way, so we're just kind of hanging out with Mobius and Loki getting Cracker Jacks. So that's fun. And then go back to the TVA, everything's falling apart. So I like that they gave us this episode to show us that, things are still shit and everything's falling apart. We need to hurry up. Miss Minutes, I want her to get a body, and I want her to be the true villain of this phase, and I want everything for her. So I hope we see her again, because so far, and I don't know how you guys feel about it, but like, Kang is cool. I like Kang, but I'm not scared of him yet. I've been more scared of Miss Minutes than I have been of Kang, and Kang has lost every single time we've seen him. So I'm here for Miss Minutes taking over a little bit. But, I know we have to get like a prime Kang, and we have to have that Kang that is going to be the one that everybody's scared of. But so far, Miss Minutes has my vote.
I think that's the thing with the potential of the idea of the one everyone will be scared of is I think it's more so like it's not this big imposing force like Thanos. It's that he just can't ever really lose because he keeps coming back. And we'll find out more of that, I think, when we learn was this part of a plan or was this the Loki's causing some chaos? Was there a king orchestrating all of this? And I noticed somebody bring it up in chat because it was something I was thinking about on the rewatch as well with Victor Timely's obsession with the hot chocolate machine and the hot chocolate in general. That first watch through just felt like a very innocent little haha moment. Second watch through, like they really hammer home that hot chocolate scene. And then it is, as soon as they're out there, convenient enough, that's when the chaos ensues, and Brad is going around pruning everybody and such. So I am kind of curious as to, do you guys think there's any significance to the hot chocolate? This is the key lime pie all over again. Was there significance to that scene, or was that just a, hey, we need a situation to make sure that Victor Timely is out in the hallway?
I don't again personally feel like there's any significance there. Maybe Victor Timely just likes hot chocolate. You know, maybe we don't see that. Like they don't make a point to tell us that. But that's kind of one of those things where if they had made a point to tell us that, and when we first meet him, like, oh, if he loves hot chocolate, then we're not even able to have this conversation right now. So I think it's just kind of one of those things where it's like he just likes hot chocolate. He wanted some hot chocolate, and then that just happened to happen at that time. But you know, I've been wrong many times before, many more times than I've been right. So I could very well be wrong here too.
We got Britt in chat, M in chat, and Brandon all think that there was something a little bit interesting going on about that. Whereas I think, again, if it maybe not even just about hot chocolate, maybe it was about he made a machine that was a fridge. Maybe he was just enthused about the idea of drinks coming out of a machine. I don't know. Reed,
How
what do
can
you
I put
think?
this on my chair?
Yeah, was there like, do you suspect foul play here, Reed? Was it just him trying to figure out his chair, or was there some foul play going on that like a higher power needed to make sure he was going out there in the hallway and he needed an excuse?
You know, I think when after I watched it, I was like, that was odd. Maybe they just wanted to show us, like, oh, he's just a dude that likes hot chocolate, and then he turned into spaghetti, so feel bad for him. But it it was really weird, right? He didn't drink any of it. Like he was going to, and then he handed it to, I don't even know what that guy's name is, to be honest, that unnamed
That was
hunter.
the dude who pruned Mobius in the first season.
Oh, well, that
Oh,
dude. Still don't know his name. But so he handed it to him, but we don't know if anything would have happened, right? Because he got pruned immediately after that. So
Yeah.
I think there might be some significance, maybe in the Kang variants. Whenever they hear about hot chocolate, something activates. I don't know. It is weird. He did act very odd with it. It was sweet, but it was odd. Yeah.
It was, I think, sweet but odd is a good way of wording it. What else do we got here? He turns to spaghetti. He gets full on Reed Richards. So if there was ever a tidbit of information that suggests that Reed Richards and Kang are related, it was both of them just getting turned into complete spaghetti. But really, what was so crazy about this episode is we talk about the race against the clock style that they've been doing. Usually they win. Usually they beat the clock, and usually they figure out what they need to do beforehand. And obviously there was the time loop stuff where Loki prunes himself from the first episode. The reason he sees Sylvie in the elevator was because he brought Sylvie to the TVA in the future, and that little time loop was created. The scary phone was just OB on the phone. And I think it just comes back to, once again, time travel is just multiversal hopping from what we've seen so far for the most part, and other than what sometimes when you go back in time it creates its own universe because that universe hadn't been created yet because you did something different back there. So it's more so universal travel to different points, different dimensions in time, but with the TVA there's just one. There's just one TVA. There's not a different universe of a TVA they can go to. It's just the one. So when they go to the future or the past, it does impact things because it lives outside of time and space. So I think that was just more of what we saw there. But bam, the explosion happens. Everybody blows up. Do they get sent to the void? What's Adam? What was your reaction? What do you think is going on?
Well, my reaction when I first watched this was just like pure shock because my guess would have been they kind of play this a little more safe. Timely somehow figures out a way to fix it, and then we end up dealing with some other threat, like that kind of pops up in the last 2 episodes, and it's like, nope, we're just gonna blow up Timely, and now we technically really don't know if that explosion just completely got inside and destroyed everything. I mean, it looks like it did, but maybe that I don't know. They needed his temporal aura or the scan of his temporal aura. I think I got that right to kind of have access to everything. So maybe in that moment, like OB was able to just reach over. Maybe when we pick up, we see that OB just reached over and hit a button and closed the blast doors. And then now they're like, we're all trapped here. And then maybe that's the thing where it's like, we're trapped here. We have no Victor Timely, no Kang variant to help us now. Like, how do we get out of this? That I think is the most likely thing. I mean, and maybe we do, but then again, maybe we do all go back to the void. Maybe that getting blasted in the face by timeline light or energy or whatever we call it is the equivalent of getting pruned. I don't know. It didn't look like Victor Timely got pruned. That looked like something else. That looked like he's just dead. I don't think we'll see him.
I think he's full on dead. I do not think we
Yeah.
will see the character of Victor Timely again.
Yeah, I agree. But it's like, I don't know if that kind of explosion was to get to them inside, if that would have the same effect, just turn them all to spaghetti. I'd be really surprised if Loki season 2, episode 4 just killed all of these characters. So my guess would be either one. I mean, I didn't really talk much about my reaction, but it was just complete shock. Like I could not believe that they actually did this because, like another thing, like you said at the top, this is like the biggest thing a Disney Plus show has done, which is kind of what we've all been wanting. I think for them to like really just up the stakes, just like and really show like, hey, we're moving the story forward with these two. It's not just the movies. We're not explaining away everything in the movies. Like you need to watch these shows too if you're going to kind of get everything that happens. And they anteed up and put their money where their mouth is here by showing that. But if I had to guess, I'd say OB probably just reached over and pushed a big button and closed the blast doors, and maybe they're okay. Either that or they're gonna all be in the void, like you said. But then I have no clue. If you asked me to bet on it or give you odds, like I wouldn't. I have no clue because it's just nothing but chaos. Like I'm not leaning one way towards the other. That's just like if I had to come up with a couple of things, that's what they'd be. But I don't know. It's just complete. It's just complete chaos. Complete chaos. Excuse me.
Reed, what was your thought process when you saw that? Like when that went down and it cuts. It just 3 seconds of a black screen before it even goes to the credits. What was your reaction? What was your thought process?
I'm very excited and happy that they did it because everything that you said, we needed it, right? I think there was a part of me that was hoping Secret Invasion would be something big, and it is what it is, right? So, but I think Loki has that thing that has to lead us to King Dynasty, right? He's particularly more involved than anything else we've seen. So I feel like they did it for a reason. They have to do this to push it further that way. I don't. I think they're all just on different timelines, right? I mean, the timelines were actively exploding, and then it looked like a ripple of the timelines, and it seems more likely that each one of them is somewhere else. I'm thinking about the trailers that we got. We still haven't seen Jet Ski, right? We haven't seen Casey, where he looks like he's in some type of prison. We haven't seen Hunter B-15, where she's like a doctor or a nurse or in a hospital of some sort. So that's where my mind is going. Unfortunately, they showed us that stuff, so I'm kind of like, well, they're fine. They're not gonna die in the 4th episode, right? Like, but I mean, I'm glad they did it because it did need that big thing. But I feel like we're gonna go back into a loop. I feel like it's all just one big loop.
Two, I like that idea of them getting shot into different timelines, maybe their home timelines. Like they just go back to their life. And whether it be that's where Mobius is in the jet skis. That's where Casey's in jail. I think the thing that would be really cool about that would be that we'd probably get to see a lot of Asgard, and I think that would be a lot of fun if they do wind up that route. There was a quote from the writers beforehand saying like, "Oh, there were some cameos we wanted to get in here, but we couldn't because they were going to be in future projects." So I think that would be really interesting if they brought it up. But I think there's also the aspect of like the Loki that got pruned at the end of this episode. Maybe all of these people do die, and then Loki and Renslayer are going to be in the void, and so he has to go to the timelines to find them. Something like that, I think, could still possibly be out there too. Adam, you look like you just got a crazy theory, so I want to throw it to you.
Well, it just popped into my head. I didn't think about this until you said we might get some Asgard. You know, what was the big surprise at the end of Thor: Love and Thunder when we get that thing that's like Thor will return? And everybody's like, wait, what? Like Thor will return? That was kind of a shocking thing to see, like confirmed this early on. What if the Thor will return thing is just now? This is like would be a little anticlimactic, but like, what if the Thor is return thing just means like we get a cameo of him in this show, and then that's the end? Like Chris Hemsworth seems like he's pretty content with playing Thor. I know there was like a big rumor that came out just this week. I think yesterday actually, that Thor 5 was in development and Taika Waititi was not returning, but that was, just what it is, a rumor. There's no official reporting on that or anything at all. But like, that was just the first thing that popped in my head. What if we see Thor in one of the next two episodes, or probably the next episode, I would assume, is when they're going to all be on the different timelines and then probably kind of come together at the end. But like, what if we see Thor in the next episode and then that was like the thing? Because like, Thor will if we see him next week, then he technically will return. So they were right to say that, even if they don't give him his own movie. And then I'm sure, Chris Hemsworth will, like most of the Avengers or all of the Avengers, I'm sure will play some role in Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars and all that stuff. But like, right, they better, especially Secret Wars. Like you got to have all the originals in Secret Wars. You just have to. But I don't know. Maybe what if that's and like I know a lot of people will say like, oh, that's just not. They wouldn't say that if it was just like a cameo tease, they probably wouldn't have put that big card at the end of the movie. Like he probably is getting his own project again. But I wouldn't rule it out. Like I mean,
what if we just see Balder?
Like, finally, oh my God, Daniel Craig. Yes.
Yeah, that'd be crazy. Oh my God.
I mean, I think I would be. I don't know how I'd feel about Thor showing up. Like, I feel like Loki's been doing fine without Thor. I want it. I want them to eventually see each other again because I don't even know how that's gonna look or be, because this isn't his Loki anyway. But he still loves I don't know. It's just I'm interested to see that reaction, but I'm kind of liking Loki by himself. I feel like he functions well without Thor, personally.
He does function a lot better without that shadow, but I would honestly like to see some type of reunion so Thor can see the growth that Loki has made. Because I do think that would be important to Loki of like, his brother has only really seen him at his lowest over and over and over again for these last 100 years. And so it would be kind of nice to have them reunite and both kind of be at their best in another project down the future.
Also, he's an uncle.
And as Britt says in chat, Loki would finally get to meet his niece Love.
Yeah. He's Uncle Loki. That'd be nice.
Exactly, Uncle Loki. All of this going forward, it's going to be crazy. My hot take, what I think we do see in the next episode, if everyone is getting sent back to their own timeline, I think Loki will get a moment with his mother like Thor did in Endgame. I think Thor had his Frigga, what's the word I'm looking for?
Farewell.
Farewell and
reunion.
Oh my gosh. Reunion.
Closure?
What? Closure. Thank you. Closure.
There you go.
Thor got his closure with Frigga in Endgame, and I think Loki is going to get his closure with Frigga when they all get sent back to their own timelines. I think that is going to be my kind of hot take about the episode, but who knows what's coming next. We have so much coming that we can't possibly begin to theorize because they just blew up everything. For all we know, they just rebooted the MCU. For all we know, this is that time loom explosion is going to cause the incursion that Doctor Strange and Clea went to stop at the end in the Doctor Strange post-credit scene, and maybe they show up in this episode because that's where she was bringing him. Who knows? Anything could happen at this point because they just blew up the whole damn TVA. And we will be back next week talking about it with Diego Peralta from Collider and discussing film. Garrett's going to be back on that episode with us as well. For the finale, episode 6, we are going to have Paul from Heavy Spoilers, the main man himself. And then we got lots of the Marvels content coming up as well. We got Agents of Fandom's own Brie Larson super fan Aisha joining us for the Marvels primer. We will be doing a Marvels review with author of MCU, The Reign of Marvel Studios, and host of Trial by Content, Dave Gonzalez. He will be joining us for our Marvels review, and then after we see the movie, we're going to be doing some games and some drafts related to that as well. We're going to have Aisha back on. Ash is going to be joining us. We're going to have a great time for that one. So make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you give us a like on YouTube. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. And we do thank those who joined us live today on Twitch as well. Grab yourself a subscription so you get all of our fun custom little emojis in there. And then make sure you're following so you don't miss out when we're live as well. Reed, where can the people find you on socials? But don't just give us that. Also, give us a little breakdown of A Bite of a Pod. Talk to us about it. How'd you start it up? Where can the people find it? And what do you talk about?
You can find us anywhere and everywhere because that's what you have to do these days, right? So, A Bite of is a podcast on our favorite books, movies, TV, mostly our current favorite ones, right? So it's things that are currently happening, but sometimes we go back. What we like to do is we like to cover the book before the movie or the series. That way we can get everybody prepared for it. But yeah, everywhere, any podcast platform, but that's where we're at.
And where can the people find you on socials?
At A Bite of Pod.
But you specifically, my man.
Well, Reed reads. So on Twitter, I'm so used to just being like a bite of. But you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Reed Reads.
There you go. And also make sure you check out agentsfandom.com because we have a lot of great content coming. Invincible is coming out soon. Embargo is 3 days away, so we're going to have spoiler-free reviews dropping right away. And then Adam's got his spoiler-filled breakdown recap as soon as that episode drops. There's Gen V coverage. We got Killers of the Flower Moon review up there. So much crazy stuff with the Marvels, etc. And Adam is still doing his MCU rewatch and review series, and the very best, at worst, the best non-Avengers movie in the MCU, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, is out now. So make sure you check that out up on agentsofandom.com. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us. We got lots of episodes. I think next week we will have only one. But no, because that's probably going to be when our Spider-Man 2 review drops on the podcast feed. So lucky for everyone, you're going to have not one, but 2 Agents of Fandom podcast episodes 3 weeks in a row. So we got good things coming. Thank you so much who joined us, and we will see you next week. We'll see if Ruben is with us, ready to close it this time.